Thanks everybody for sticking around for the next session. And we're very excited to welcome Dr. Brian Walker all the way from Western Australia. And Brian, of course, is one of our Legalise Cannabis MPs who's been elected to state parliaments in the last few years. In fact, you and your colleague Sophia were the first of the dominoes to fall, so thanks for doing that. And Brian is also a practising GP specialising in cannabinoid medicine. So he's had a lot of experience helping patients in that domain. But today, Brian is going to talk about the highs and lows of really your experience in WA Parliament, and as well as, you know, offering your advice and ideas on the potential for victory and your map for the future. So very excited to hear that. Thanks for coming all this way, Brian.
Thank you for having me. Now, I'm probably going to give the most boring talk of the whole weekend. The question I had in my mind is, what on earth am I going to say? When I first stood for Parliament, of course, you think, well, minor party, well, micro party then, no chance of getting in really, we'll make a bit of a splash, and then that'll be it. And then you suddenly find yourself, whoa, now I'm a politician. And I don't know what everyone here thinks, but I didn't have a very good image of politicians in my mind. Lying, cheating, unfaithful, it's a lot of bad images. And here I was, thrown into this mix. Now, the first few weeks after you're elected, if you're elected into the upper house, it's never you start from now, bang, tomorrow you're in Parliament. There's a kind of a time for getting yourself sorted. And your mind has to get sorted as well. Because I don't know what you think, but my impression was, Member of Parliament can come in, legalise cannabis, right. Legalise cannabis is going to happen now, because we now have a politician from the party, and that's the view of the people is going to come through. The laws are coming out right now. And of course, everyone was saying, where's the law? Why haven't you done this? Why are you becoming an ordinary politician like all the others, the liars, the cheaters? How come you haven't actually done what you said you were going to do? And that's a very valid question. But it basically speaks to the fact that for most people, the parliamentary system is a closed shop. It's like a secret society. If anyone has joined a secret society or a society with secrets, you'll find that there's mysteries there, there's certain phrases to use, certain behaviours to take. And it's exactly the same in politics. So we rocked up to introduce ourselves to the parliamentary leadership. That's the ones not in Parliament, the politicians, the ones who run the show behind the scenes. And of course, this is the first lesson in politics. It's not the politicians who run things, it's the ones behind the scenes. And this, I should maybe just segue into one of the major things I need to talk about, and that is the style of communication. Because, as you probably know with body language, communication, the words that we use is only about 7% of our communication. A lot of the communication comes here from the gestures that we use. And these are interpreted. For example, this one here is certainly a gesture that most people would understand. This one here is a gesture which most people would understand, but has very different meanings in different parts of the world. And it's exactly the same when you're meeting people at, say, an interview. And we were actually interviewed. Sophia and myself were interviewed by the clerk of the Parliament. This is the clerk. You might think a clerk's a clerk. No, this is the main legal person in the Parliament. And in our case, of the Council and of the lower house, the Assembly. So a very influential person indeed, with his assistant and with the director, the leader of the Parliament building itself. So these three gentlemen sat in front of us, and Sophia and I walk in, and they were expecting to find Legalise Cannabis party members, dreadlocks, looking a bit shabby, dressed in Nimbin-type clothing. And what they found was a doctor and the nurse walking in there in a jacket, proper slacks, Sophia dressed in a pretty formal dress, looking like business people walking in. And the looks that we saw, first of all, there's a communication was coming across here. We hadn't said a word. And we sit down there, look at them, and smile. And wait to receive wisdom from on high. So the first communication was, oh, we've misjudged this. And then we begin to speak. And we speak intelligently. I mean, a nurse and a doctor, yeah, we're going to say or ask sensible questions. And then they begin to think, hang about, this is not the idea that we had before. We thought they were just pot smokers coming in to waste parliamentary time because of a protest vote. When we later met our new colleagues, the ones who were going through a similar process to ourselves, they also had this idea, you're the Legalise Cannabis Party, and they were so dismissive. Oh, yeah, pot smokers, single term, you're not going to mount to anything at all. We're the real people, we're the Labour Party. And they said, cannabis smokers? Like that. As if we're going to be pot smokers ourselves. They make an assumption like that, and they also, at the same time, with their language, their body language, they made it very, very clear, you are an inferior species. You don't belong here. You're not part of us. Okay. So now we have here, coming into the reality of political life. Should be nice and easy. Member of Parliament, highly respected, highly paid. Well, you're not, actually. And influential. And we found ourselves in a political system where the Labour Party was by far the overwhelming power. They could rattle through their legislation from the Assembly into the Council, rattle it through, and if we protested, if we had placards, they wouldn't stop. They could just put whatever legislation they wanted through Parliament. And in fact, they have done that. And so I sat there thinking, what on earth am I going to do? Am I here as a waste of time? Am I here spruiking legalising cannabis, and it's just a complete waste of time? I'll be steamrollered by the juggernaut of the other political parties, the experienced parties, the ones with large backroom offices, the ones with 100 years of experience, with lots of funds available. I haven't got a chance here. So you can imagine my mental state as a politician. And that first year when I came to Nimbin, and they said, there's a politician for the Legalise Cannabis, the first two elected in Australia, well, worldwide actually. And we're thinking, yeah, it's fine, but what the hell are we going to do? So, the navigating the troubled seas of politics. And it is a navigation, and they are troubled seas. Sometimes it's flat, and sometimes it's very, very stormy. So who are we? What are we actually doing? How do we get stuff through? And I mentioned earlier the fact that we've got a secret society. And there's words, there's formulations, there's a position to take. And that's exactly what we found. We walk into the chamber there, and it's formalized. You can't stand up and shout something. There's certain times you can speak, but most of the time, you stay stumm. You can't speak. There are certain ways of speaking. For example, if you want to introduce, say, a point of order, you can't just say point of order and just rattle off something to stop a discussion. You have to actually specify the point of order. So the standing orders which are there, you've got to know them, or at least know how to find them. Otherwise, you get slapped down. And we're now also in a sea of politicians who are all either expert, they've been there for some years, or they've come through the party ranks. They're party loyalists who have lived and breathed politics and understand the language. And when you make your first mistake, you're standing up there, and it's all televised, of course, and your first mistake, and then you can see this look of contempt coming across. The tyros, the idiots, the ones who don't know what they're doing, the ones who are representing a very small niche party. You can see this contempt across the chamber. So the first thing that they do is to try and make you small. So what do they do to us? The first thing that we got as a party is within the first 2 weeks, we had to put a bill forward. A bill. Now, to put a bill forward, you've got to actually have an object. You've got to have the legal wording prepared by the drafters of Parliament. And they'd given us 2 weeks from entering Parliament to putting out a bill. Now, can you imagine what they would have said if we had failed to do that? Yes, they're not good, they can't do it, they don't understand what's going on. No. And it wasn't actually 2 weeks, you see, because one of the rules in Parliament is that you can't speak until you've given your inaugural speech. And you don't have your inaugural speech on day one. There's about 17 newbies in Parliament for our session, this parliamentary term. So you have to actually slot them in. And it wasn't the first week, I think, that we had our inaugural speeches. So that time for actually getting used to speaking is actually very much less than the 2 weeks that they gave us. Now, fortunately, the team that I have behind me, and here I mentioned the team that I have behind me, the ones who have held things together, the ones who have guided, the ones who have shown what to do, the ones who have given solid advice because they know what's going on and can educate as a kind of a crash course in how do you become a politician. And that team was able to say, well, we have actually something here which is residual from a previous attempt at a bill. We'll repackage that and put that forward. And so it was. Can you imagine what happened in the political world when, after 2 weeks, there appears in the notice paper that we're putting forward a bill? And they're thinking, okay. And then we get up and we put forward the bill and we use the correct language. And then, of course, the whole thing just doesn't... It's still on the notice paper. It's still there. But they haven't taken any action because that's, again, the life of politicians. But after that, I spoke to the president of the chamber. Now, you would know the speaker in the lower house. We have a president. And she's actually the most senior of the politicians in the house. The president, the speaker of the assembly, and then the other ones. It's a kind of a pecking order. So the president says to me, "Whoa, it seems to me as if you've taken to this like a duck to water." What she was actually saying was, "You've surprised us. You have done what we didn't think you could do, and therefore what then happens is now the respect begins to accrue. So now what's happening is that we're working as politicians to communicate with the other politicians to then get a relationship." And this is an ongoing process. It's going right through, not just this parliamentary term, but into the next term and beyond. So it's crucial, it's critical that we actually stand up there and show a picture to the world, but also to the politicians we're dealing with. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. We are reasonable people. These are reasonable views. And we demand your attention to these. Troubled waters. Next thing we've got to get used to is how do you actually put views across? Well, we've only got very limited time for speaking. So you might think you're politicians, you can speak all the time you want. No, most of it actually comes from the government. Most of it is actually putting forward a bill that's going through the chamber, and questions are asked in the second reading. But otherwise, you've only got limited time for speaking. I can give a speech, if you like, in relation to a bill, the second reading speech. But otherwise, I'm not able to get up and speak. Now, if you look, and I do suggest, if you're bored, if you want to actually get a good sleep, look at the parliamentary page and look at the members there, and you can see their speeches. Some of them have got about that much on the page. Others, like myself, have got about 300 so far in 3 years. And this is because we are probably the freest people in the chamber. We are the freest members of Parliament because we're not bound by the Labour Party, for example, the majority. They've got to follow what the leaders say. They have their caucus. But once they have come to a decision, even if they vehemently oppose it, they're not allowed to say anything about that. They stick with it. What then happens is they sit down there and they sit and they sit and they sit and they sit. And occasionally they get given something to say. This is a speech praising the McGowan government or praising the Cook government, okay, and then we can debate that. Meaningless speeches, but it gives them a profile, you see. That's the life of a backbencher of government. One of the most boring jobs in the world. The opposition is a bit better because they've still got the need to follow what the party is saying, okay, but they've got more freedom to speak against the bill, so they can do that, like we do as well. We, however, in the Legalise Cannabis Party, we have been given free rein by our party. As long as you are going to put forward cannabis as being the important topic here, you can have an opinion about almost everything you like, which means we can also have varying points of view. And because we are people, we have different points of view. So we are able to give a nuanced speech to any topic that comes up. Most often we're on the same page. But if we have a difference of views, so do the people that we're representing. And so we can actually have the freedom for representing the people as members of Parliament, as elected members of that region, rather than following the party. Because again, troubled waters that you're navigating. One of the problems as a politician, you go into politics and the first thing you do is you swear an oath. I swear to serve the people of the state. And having given that oath, you then get led to your chair, and then you promptly forget that oath. You promptly forget it because your first duty is to the party. Probably the second and third duty is to the party as well. Way beyond that comes what do I personally feel? Can I make a statement or a nuance in my delivery about something else? And the people don't actually feature at all. And that's a political truth, and we all know this. We all feel this when we see what they're doing to us in the state, in the country. And that really is one of the major problems that we have to deal with. How do I put a point across when the vast majority of my colleagues in the chamber are representing their party, their ideology, but not the people, and we stand up and we want to speak to the topic. And we often find ourselves very much as a minority. So when we disagree with the vote, we'll find ourselves maybe 4 against 19 votes, or even at times 2 against 19, which makes us objects of ridicule, because now we come to another political storm. The government in every state and federally control the narrative, by which I mean that the media is basically in the pockets of the government. Now, I'm sure you all know this, but the fact is that what happens is that the media need information to put out in their documentaries, in their newspapers, in their online articles. And what they need is information from the government. What do you plan to do? How much money are you going to spend on homelessness? What are you going to do about the rise of crime in this particular area? Now, what the government says is, if you want to get the information, you need to actually abide by our guidelines. In this case, for example, they've made it very clear you do not speak with Walker. If you speak with Walker, make it something laughable. Make it something risible, if I will use the words from the Life of Brian film, risible. Laugh at him, make him an object of derision, humiliate him if you like. But for the love of God, don't put out what he's actually saying. And as a result, the mainstream media has produced, for example, my favorite example, one of my Christmas cards I give out to members of Parliament and to the public. The West, the newspaper, the only readable one in the West, said, it's actually a really beautiful, it's a collector's item. The 3 so far are collector's items. And the words came out, it's a poorly photoshopped, controversial Christmas card. And she went on to criticize me, personally, and to make fun of the weed-smoking doctor. And you can see what's going to happen to the public. They see, yeah, that doctor there. He's a waste of time, a waste of space. He's a single-issue believer, and he's putting out crap Christmas cards. Why are we paying him our taxpayers' money? You see, so you're being unplatformed. You're being attacked, but insidiously. The government isn't saying anything. They smile and say, yeah, hi, Brian, how are you doing? But behind the scenes, what they're doing is screw this guy, make it hard for him. And the people with the great critical thinking faculties that we all know are present in the general population are just following that blindly. They're consuming it. They may not know what they're doing. They may just read the paper and see this, and they don't think about that, but their opinion is being set by a government which controls a narrative. Why? Because they want their story to come forward. They don't want anything else. For example, did you know that in Western Australia, we have got a very large population, as far as things go, in a very, very large state. We have spent on public housing for the homeless or for the ones at risk of homelessness. We have created, in the last 7 years, a total of 117 new buildings for the homeless. And we have spent less than Tasmania. With a smaller population, they've spent more on public housing than WA. And yet, the housing minister is putting out facts and figures about how well they're doing, how many millions they've spent, how much they've developed, and everything is good. Until you begin to check the details and see what's actually happening. And the narrative is, look how good we are. the classical political fig jam. The facts are, you've actually screwed us. And they're doing the same thing with the Legalise Cannabis, and I would believe in every other state. The difficulty with WA is that we are very much led by a one-sided political party, and the balance is not there. Next Parliament, a different story altogether. But for the moment, we are very much outnumbered. So, political stormy seas. Imagine, if you will, that there's a small army here, and there's a huge horde out there with their weapons, and they've got pretty advanced weapons, and they're saying, right, okay, we're not going to appear to be brutal, but we're going to leave you as you are, but you play things the wrong way, whoosh, we're going to roll right over you. And this threat is always present, and with the media control, they have got one very strong weapon. So when we get up to speak in the Parliament, we need to be aware of any false words we give out there. They're going to jump on it. And I don't know about yourselves, when you're speaking, you might find yourself saying the odd word which is maybe inappropriate. I mean, telling the government, fuck you, for example, may not be inappropriate, but if you're known for doing that, this foul-mouthed, weed-smoking doctor has put another diatribe against the Parliament. Another example of that, a little while back, I was speaking at the yes-no vote rally. And the point I put across was that we have, in Western Australia, an autocratic dictatorship. And I put it to you, we do. I said many other things as well, but that's the only thing that came out in the media. So Dr. Walker, this weed-smoking doctor, again, they don't call it cannabis, they don't call it marijuana, they call it a weed or pot-smoking doctor. Irrespective of the fact that I've never smoked a joint in my life. I've used cannabis, but I haven't smoked it, because I'm a rabid anti-smoker. Does that come across? Not at all. The narrative is controlled. So as politicians, we are not playing on an equal playing field at all, and we need to learn how to fight. We need to learn how to use political martial arts to get our point of view across. And it's not easy, believe me, it's not easy. Because they are expert at this. They have the jiu-jitsu ready for when it comes to managing how the messages come across. For example, another example here, we put out a motion, for example, suggesting, let's take one out of the air, that medical cannabis should be more widely prescribed and available in the PBS, and the government needs to actually consider PBS scheduling this is a federal question, not a state one, but scheduling that. Now, you might agree with that, but you can't say so as a government because they would look bad. So what they do is they then say, right, we're going to put an amendment to the motion. And they amend the motion to say, we acknowledge the great efforts of the Cook government to recognise the needs of medical cannabis users, and we have now got the choice. Are we going to vote against our own motion, which they have amended, or are we going to support the government's motion, which is the amendment of our motion? Either way, we lose. So sneaky things like that. And they're very good at that. I used the example of a ship on the ocean and the stormy seas and the flat seas. There are other things that we can do as well. As a politician, one of the best flat seas I have seen was when they, very soon after I was elected, realised, well, we better get Walker out of the way, so we'll give him a select committee. Now, the select committee was actually a chance for me to actually get 5 of us together to look very closely at medical cannabis and industrial hemp. Now, I really wanted that committee to be about cannabis full stop. But the government makes the rules. No, you're not doing that, just medical cannabis and industrial hemp. And the recent, well, at that time, recent report from Fiona Patton from Victoria with recreational cannabis, so legalising that, which almost passed, apart from 2 people who changed their minds at the last moment, and that bill was then rejected. So that motion there had been dealt with. Let's deal with the medical cannabis, because you're a doctor, this is your thing as well. So then I had, remember Still Waters here? I had 3 Labour members and 1 National at the time, and myself as the chairman. And I spoke to these Labour members and said, right, this is what we're going to be doing. This is what the task is. And they, all of them, were convinced that cannabis is a dangerous drug, a narcotic even. So what did we do? We took them to Lucy Haslam's UIC, and actually it was the Sunshine Coast. Put it pissed down with rain. Does it always rain in Sunshine Coast? No. Anyhow, you should have seen their eyes, their faces, when they heard what was going on. They went, oh my God. As this wealth of experience came across, this wealth of experience of how cannabis can transform lives. They looked at the industry there, about the businesses there which are creating, if you like, jobs. It was just a fantastic experience. They'd never, ever experienced that before in their lives. And they came away thinking, oh, we'll have to reconsider this. Then we took them on a trip down to the growers of the southwest of WA, and they saw how do you make the industrial hemp into the oils, how can the oils be used, and they realised the iniquity, the disgraceful state of legislation in our state, probably our nation as well. Then we went on a tour to the Czech Republic, to Germany, and to Israel, and looked at some really solid science. These guys came back, the full bottle with cannabis, the full bottle. And the select committee report went in, excellent. The government accepted almost all of the recommendations. The two they couldn't was basically because that was out with their control, so I'll buy that. And by the way, one of the recommendations has been put into a working group. They've accepted the THC driving regulation. Okay? They say, yep, okay, fine, we acknowledge that needs to be fixed, and therefore, what they're now going to do is they're going to get the experts together to make a plan for how do we rectify this injustice. Now, I am certain that they're going to be modifying the law. I am reasonably certain they're going to be making THC driving from medically prescribed cannabis not illegal. I'm not sure how they're going to do that, but it will change. And I think this will be the start of a floodgate of legislative change throughout our nation. I'm very hopeful of that. That's if the government is actually, they've got a brain. I will, of course, be speaking with the Premier after the election to ensure that the changes happen now, not 5 years in the future. So this is something that we're playing with. And I mentioned here the political landscape and over the seas. It's a consultation now, having established your abilities, established that you're actually a decent person, having established that you can speak with some degree of authority and certainty and assuredness, having proved to the people that you are actually politically astute, you're a person of some standing, if you like, then I can now begin to speak with others in other parties on an equal basis. Before that time, oh no, you're just a beginner here, you don't know what you're doing, you're just a minor party, useless, we're not even going to look at you, we're just going to look away from you. And that happened in the first months, but it rapidly changed. And now what we're seeing, because we've communicated with the politicians as politicians and successfully done that over the 3 years, we're now able to determine that when we are in a position of able to speak with some degree of power, with the balance of power in the future, that we are now treated as proper politicians who can have impact, and that will actually lead to changes in the imminent future, we hope. So I mentioned here the fighting as well, how to learn how to fight. So political jiu-jitsu, you have to learn that very, very quickly as well. It's not as easy, is it, as you think when you're coming in? Yes, we'll make a bill for legalising cannabis. Whew, it's done. No, it's a process, and a very difficult process too. Because another area that we've got to be aware of are the stormy seas. They're actually kept artificially quiet, the stormy seas, because we have a civil service which its only function is to keep the status quo. Now, if you've watched Yes Minister or Utopia or The Chaser, things like that, that's actually real. That's real life. They are not able to think in terms of the future. Their only consideration is to keep things the way they were, because they know this is what happened last year, the year before, 10 years ago. This is safe. This has been done before. This is why no changes are made, for example, to the corrective services. We're going to punish people and we're going to blame them when they come out and make crime again. Rather than innovative thinking, I wonder how we could do with rehabilitation. Perhaps we should maybe work with alcohol consumption in deprived areas and maybe make an effort there. Perhaps we should have some new thinking entirely. No, they don't do that. They think the old ways will punish them more. More legislation, more reduction in our rights, more forbidden things that they can then punish. This is a way of thinking which is now part of our status quo. And that is something we need to fight about. But, as I said before, we've now moved into a political arena where there's forms, there's words, there's ability to hold yourself in a certain way. The status quo is built into the system. Now, let me say that for you quite clearly. We have structures built into the system which are keeping us stuck in the past. and change very unlikely unless something earth-shattering happens. What is that earth-shattering event? Friends, it's you. You. Because while we work on your behalf, we also absolutely need the people to be with us. The people, the ones that we swear an oath to serve. The ones who are neglected immediately you've sworn that oath. The ones who generally don't pay attention to the fact that they're being abused by the government because they've got other things to worry about, the cost of living, finding a house, getting a job, looking after your kids who are missing school because of, etc. Okay, so that the people are actually being held, if you like, to ransom, but more than that, they're being distracted. I mentioned the political games that are playing. Well, the classical, it's 2,000 years old, 3,000 years old perhaps. How do you distract the people? The Romans knew it. Bread and games. Build the Colosseum to entertain the people with gladiators and give them food. Okay? And then you can rule. That's what they're doing to us just now. They're distracting us. What's our bread and games just now? Well, AFL. Okay? The tribalism associated with the sports and how much is put out. This is what you've got to focus on. The next thing, I don't know about you, but I don't watch television, hardly at all, in fact. But television is a great way of distracting people from the events. So you'll find people talking, what was on television last night? What did you think of that show? I don't even know the shows you're talking about. But those who are distracted by these things, that's a political tool to keep the people quiet, to stop you thinking critically, to lead you into just ignoring what's going on. And then you discover after a while, oh, there's a problem, when it's too late. For example, did you know, in Western Australia particularly, that we now have the commissioner of the CCC has been physically appointed, named by a premier. And to do that, he rewrote the law. He rewrote legislation to name someone to take a position which a parliamentary committee had already refused 3 times. So he changes the law. And he can do that because he's got a majority in both houses. That's not democratic. Then he makes his good friend, Kim Beazley, as governor, was removed, and in his place went the past police commissioner, Chris Dawson. So you've now got a police commissioner as governor, an appointee of the CCC. The CCC is really great at not taking seriously what happens with the police. So you get bad things happening, for example, a manifest injustice, and oh, nothing to see here, all good. So it's very good at doing that. And then they have these laws, which they never intend to put into practice. The Public Health Act 2016, which allows, I think it's paragraph or clause 184, something like that, which allows a police officer, on the command of the leader of the pandemic, to stop you, to strip you, and to have you forcibly injected with a vaccine against your will. Now, if you're for vaccine or against vaccine, I don't really care. The fact is that your choice for whether you take a treatment is being hampered by the fact that you can be stopped, stripped, and injected by a police officer. And what happens? They've changed the law now. It used to be that the chief health officer was the one who gave that command, this is what you will do. Everyone's going to be vaccinated whether they want it or not. Now, it's not the chief health officer. Can you guess? It's the commissioner of police who make that decision. So you tell me now, we haven't got a police state creeping in by stealth. And how many people actually know this? And so the political wars here are the fact that the people are suppressed. The bread and games is keeping them from actually checking out what's going on. And we politicians are hampered in being able to draw this to your attention because of the rules which apply in politics. And if ever anyone asks you why these 5 politicians have failed to get legalization of cannabis right now, the answer is because we have been played from the very beginning and we're getting there. We will win this, but it takes time. And we need your support. You are essential because your voice makes a difference. So the simple message here is that we have learned a lot. We are working very hard and we can see it. Does anyone here sense what's actually happening. I've heard this time and time again this weekend in Nimbin, very encouraging. There's a sense in the air, things are moving, things are going to happen. We asked the question, I think, night before last, was it last night? I forget, there's just one thing. Nimbin is very confusing. But it's saying, yes, we reckon legalisation within 5 years or less. THC driving, I'm reckoning November next year, at least in WA. Other people think maybe this year as well. We're getting there. We're getting there. And there's something happening here. We're being held back. We're being braked by the system. We're getting there. We need your voices to make this happen. Not just your voices. Because if 80% of the population actually agrees with legalization or decriminalization, then we ought to get 80% of the people speaking and saying, we want justice, we want fairness. They haven't got that yet. And it's because we, as a people, are quiet. The few voices in Parliament can get drowned out by the majority. So it's actually a big game. And if anyone asks me how I feel about that, how am I in that system, I have to say, look, I'm sad to say, I'm a bit, how can I put this? I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, but I'm enjoying it thoroughly, hugely. Because when you see the games they're playing, and you're able to understand what's going on, and you know what you're going to be doing with them, it's just a matter of taking revenge in your own good time. Because the time is coming. The time is coming. The system has to be changed. Because at the moment, it's not a system which actually suits the people. Us, we the people, are not being well served by a system. We need to change this system. And change is coming, whether they like it or no. Whether it's going to be just the people saying well, enough is enough. I mean, know what's happening, and the people are just saying, no, we can't have this anymore. Or whether it's a breakdown in social order because of the increased violence, the increased disrespect for authority figures in our society. We're going to have a time, and it's not far away, I think, that the people are going to say, we're not having this. We're going to just protest. This is stop. We're going to have a France or something similar. No, we don't want to go there. We can change this. If we start this process here, we, the cannabis community, if we start that process, we can lead that process, this transformation, into a new society, into a new politics. And that's where we need every single one of you to spread the word. Stand with us. Stand for truth. Stand for freedom. And indeed, stand for growth. I'm happy to take questions.
Dr. Bryan, good afternoon. I'm a prospective MP. I'm about to run in the Queensland election in October. As a novice, what would you recommend the best one thing that I could do in the next nearly 6 months to win my electorate?
One of the things which the politicians would do, the back office boys, is work out what your percentages are, what your voter subsection is like, how you can play to different strengths. If you've got an aging population, you'd want to focus on how cannabis can help with arthritis, or indeed slowing dementia. If you've got a young family area, you could point out how you could manage cannabis as a parent to get a better sleep and still be able to wake to your child. Or indeed for the children who have got horrible problems like, say, arthritis, juvenile arthritis, or indeed autism, ADHD, that there's good research showing how cannabis can be helpful if prescribed properly by people who know what they're doing. And then that's opening up the whole scientific area, and then pointing out that you've been, that the science is being hidden from you, and then looking here at how we need to embrace innovative thought for the good of the people. You'd also really want to recognize that most people, while they may support cannabis, actually they find cost of living far more important, or the availability of housing. So there has to be some kind of preparedness to speak to these points and to speak often. So you're going to want public attention, you're going to want media, you're going to want to hold, meetings in pubs, just speak out and say what's going on, set up a stall, get a gazebo if you like, and just make yourself known, attend the fairs, attend the country festivals to see what's going on with that, so that you can then put the voice out there, speak with people, and learn how to take rejection and turn that round into acceptance. So the communication, as I mentioned before, is highly important, to allow people to have their view and then to say, yes, I understand your view, and have you considered this, and then move on to saying what might be considered differently. Some people will say, no, I'm not having a bar of it. They just close their ears, no. Other people say, oh, it's interesting, tell me more. And that's who you can then engage in. Another thing I will be saying more and more is, if you vote for left or vote for right, actually in politics they're all the same. You change the government, you're getting more of the same, because the civil servants are actually telling what to do. So if you want to keep things the way they are, vote for your previous ones. Just do that. And you get more of the same. If you like what you've got now, keep on voting the same. If you think what we've got now is not good enough, you have to make a change. I prefer you vote for us, but you have to make a change. Because otherwise, you're going to get more of the same. And the next time, and the time after that. And your kids and your grandkids are going to have more of the same, because you keep staying with the same system. And if you want that, that's what you do. I would suggest you make a different choice. And then that opens up a whole variety of the different parties. Now, you could then say we're two-party preferred, and we have got either left or right, and whatever. But there's only about 1/3 in each of those groups, plus or minus. And they've got 1/3 is the crossbench in most parliaments, more or less. Okay, so the crossbench, if you can unite that, or get a larger section of that, you've actually got the balance of power there. Then we can do something. Queensland is different, of course, it's unicameral, so you've got to get first past the post. Okay, but if enough people would agree with that, then you will find acceptance there.
We're coming with mics. Please wait, there's someone down the back and you're going to be next.
Hello, I've got a mic here.
Good morning.
Oh, no?
No, someone else first.
Hello?
Hello, hi.
Yes.
It's Frances from Perth, as you know.
Yes.
So I have two questions. The first is, in relation, you talked about the Corruption and Crime Commission and, the sort of breakdown in checks and balances that has happened. Do you feel like the media in Perth is informing the population enough about things that are happening in the system of government in this regard and other things? And if not, what do you think is the best way to get the message out to the people? Here's my first question. My second question is, you talked about crossbench and expanding the crossbench. Do you think in WA we're doing enough for crossbench collaboration? And do you think it's important? And if so, how could we encourage more crossbench collaboration and also widening the crossbench?
That's two very sensible questions. First of all, for the media, of course they're biased. All media is biased. The West is hugely biased, and we know from the reporters they've been told not to speak with us. Other parties I'm not sure about, but they're certainly very good at putting forward the Labour's point of view and spruiking that, I think, inappropriately. Having said that, Basil Zimpelis has got free rein in his comments there to put the Liberal point of view forward as well. So that's the beginning of a change, especially in an election year coming up. How can we change that? Well, we can't. We don't have enough money to pay Kerry Stokes. We just don't do that. So the only option I see there is to actually get social media engaged, to get the alternative media involved. And the problem with alternative media is that they are also biased. So you need to learn how to, and you do, of course, to say your piece to the different media, allow them to put it across, and then deal with the fallout then, as long as the word is getting out there. So the far right, for example, has an equal right to know what your point of view is as the far left. The mainstream media just now just ignores us. But as we get the social media going, as we get the alternative media out there more prolifically, then bit by bit, the mainstream media has to pick up on that. And I would suspect what's going to happen now is that they're going to be seeing more concerted involvement in putting out how corrupt the system actually is. And it has to be a very blind media not to pay attention to that, because then they really are serving the people. The second question here was the crossbench. The crossbench is very small in our parliament just now. It will increase. How much, we don't know, but it will be a substantial increase. We're going to get a variety of people, including the One Nation, and including more Greens, and including the Legalise Cannabis. The trick is going to be to work with the crossbench to form an alliance, which is going to be a fluid alliance at times, but enough to give the government thought, a concern as to can we get our legislation across, or do we need to make amendments in concession to what the crossbench is saying so they can put their legislation through, but with the appropriate amendments. For example, the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, which was put through much against all of our dismay, and we protested, we voted against that. Okay, and then after it came in, and it became immediately obvious to people, this is actually just crap legislation. Intent was good, but the actual outcome was miserable. And they had to reverse that very, very quickly, to their detriment. In the coming Parliament, I anticipate that this will be, our voice will be heard more clearly, and they'll make the appropriate amendments, bearing in mind that in this current term, there's hardly any amendments from the opposition or the crossbench have been passed at all, implying that their legislation is perfect as it's been drafted, and it isn't. But that will change.
Question here.
You say that it's the people who can bring about change, us people. Us the people are individuals. As an individual, what can we do to bring about change?
Oh, excellent question. When you write to your MP an email, a lot of people use the kind of the pro forma, click your point here, and a kind of a letter goes out to the MP en masse by 10, 20, 30, 100 people. It gets binned. When we see these emails, in our office we don't do that, but in general, when MPs see these mass-produced emails, they get ignored because there's no thought gone to them, just the fact that you've protested. We'll maybe note that a lot of people have been writing, but we won't actually take any notice of that because it's simply, it's noise. If you're going to write, I would recommend that you write a letter from the heart, from the individual, differently. So you actually engage as an individual with an individual point of view that is different from the mass-produced, because that might get noticed better. You still won't get a reply from most of the offices, if you do get a reply from the minister, it's going to be from ministerial staff, not from the minister. It'll come out in the name of the minister, but it won't be from the minister. There is that. The second thing you can do is actually engage. You can engage as an individual with others with a similar point of view to actually get people active again. And you can then, what you find is that groups begin to coalesce together. The enemy of progress is when people begin to fractionate into different groups. Because the old adage there, divide and conquer. We need to have united voice. And this only happens really for legislation which is so patently obvious that if I'm going to be a far left-wing or a far right-wing, this still is a truth which needs to be addressed. For example, voluntary assisted dying. Everyone apart from the religious fanatics was actually in favour of that. The same thing for the gay marriage. Again, the vast body of people said, yes, this is sensible, let's do this. So these things, and I do think cannabis, if we put it in the context of an injustice against the people and that health has suffered and the whole system is being screwed over by the attention paid to a healthy healing herb rather than actually dealing with the issues in society, if we as a society can get together and say, we want justice, then that would come across. And that's going to be the work of the people to stand up and say, and talk to your friends, wherever you're at work, on the bus on the way home, or wherever you are, that you have conversations with people and allow people to hear, this has to change. But yes, an individual. We can't really speak about the people because we've all got different views. In fact, if I was to mention one word just now, if I was to mention, for example, the word understanding, let's have an understanding of the political processes. Each one of you would have a different understanding of that word itself, and you could talk about different points, each one of you. So we're not one group. It's like The Life of Brian, one of my favourite films. We are all different. I'm not. And people do think, as a body, if they've got the right ingredients, and that is the passion for that which is right, irrespective of the other things round about. For example, the housing crisis. We need to find that, an answer for that. If you happen to be a landlord and you're increasing your prices by 20, 30%, you're saying, nah, I'm cool with this. Okay? So we need to actually get the people together who share that point of view and make a difference.
Any more questions? Please put up your arm if you've got another question or comment from Brian. Oh, yes, we see one. Just a moment.
I told you it's a boring talk, didn't I?
to domestic violence. Oh, sorry. Oh, is that right? Yeah, domestic violence is wakening up the normal population. So also maybe the black market, the drug criminals, maybe will get to the people eventually, because you've just lost 2 Western Australian young men to the drug criminal gangs in Mexico. So maybe that's a way to get through, the black market aspect of it all.
Excellent. Look, let's take the DV for the first one. This is distressing at every level. What's happening now? Well, the government is putting about $100 million into Western Australia into managing domestic violence. Think about that. They're putting $100 million into managing the consequences of domestic violence, giving shelters to women, ignoring the fact that 10% of the domestic violence victims are actually men. But women will focus on, as is right and proper. And that's good. But the question I have is, what is the underlying cause? But I keep saying I'm a fundamentalist. It's all very well trying to put a plaster on the symptoms. What's the underlying cause? Why is domestic violence on the rise? Are you going to call all men barbarians and potential DV abusers and sanction them? Is that the right way of dealing with domestic violence? Is there a better way of dealing with that? What about the men who are feeling emasculated? They're being bullied at work. They're not getting enough pay to put food on the table. They're feeling themselves deprived. They're testosterone deficient because of the foods they've been taking, the plastics in the food, and they're just feeling absolutely crap. Okay, and their communication skills with themselves and with others is basically primitive. And so what you've now got is violence as an answer, as a sensible answer. It's the same reason why people take a knife into a supermarket. Why on earth would you do that? Okay, what's the underlying cause? We can have metal detectors at the entrance, but why would someone take a knife to a supermarket in the first place? What is the underlying cause? And that needs to be looked at. So yes, it's all very well and good putting an answer on top of there, but the question I would put to the people is, why aren't you asking what's the underlying cause? And the answer that's not being looked at is because it's too difficult to deal with, and it goes against probably the big end of town. We're making lots of profits from people and oppressing the people. We are an oppressed people, although we call ourselves free, we're not. And as a result of that, there's social disharmony, there's unrest rising. And the sad result is violence in every aspect. Man against man, man against woman, and indeed woman against man. So yes, the other one we mentioned, DV, was the black market and the criminals. Oh boy. We all know, if we were to have cannabis grown freely, that the black market would cease to exist as a viable business. Growing it free in your backyard, there'd be some protests, but we know it takes some time. In the US, for example, the black market has decreased, but it's still there, and still very much there for growing illicit cannabis. It's a matter of price. So if you regulate it and make it expensive, then the black market will reduce its price and still flourish. So there are issues to be dealt with that. The criminality is another question here. Why do people choose a life of crime rather than actually having a life which is actually fairly safe? What's the underlying cause for that? And then we're looking here at things like mental health in children which hasn't been recognized, ADHD and unable to move forward in their lives. What about the aspects there of parental misguidance leading people into a bad life, the parents with the transgenerational trauma, they're dealing with that. So these are issues which allow the young to grow into a place where for them it's actually a viable option to become a criminal because it's the way I've been taught. So dealing with that underlying cause would be useful. The concept here of actually punishing people, putting them into prison, which is what we currently do, simply makes the criminal size increase. They don't get any real help. There's certainly nothing in the way of rehabilitation. And I used to work, by the way, in the corrective services. So I know at first hand how little psychiatric help is given to what is actually a very large cohort of psychiatrically unwell people. Yes, we've got things like depression, major depression, psychotic issues, but also ADHD, with a very altered approach to life. And on top of that, we've got fetal alcohol syndrome, we've got the neurodivergent the people there who just haven't been either seen or treated. And so our prison systems is actually making things worse, rather than looking at the Scandinavian model, which I think would far better reduce the recidivism rates and help people to recover. And the results for then, we know that very well from the figures, the GDP increases, societal safety increases, and people are better off. Mind you, Scandinavia's got a problem now, having put in all those migrants from Syria and similar places with their very different mindset and also their own trauma, and the violence now is increasing. So underlying causes have to be dealt with. But yes, if we were to fix that, that would be a multifactorial one. But the politicians at the moment, those civil servants with their single attitude of keeping things the way they are, all they know is punishment. They don't actually understand the benefits of true rehabilitation and looking at society. The one example we can have in Western Australia is the ability to freely give alcohol to people who are troubled with alcohol. And in parts of WA, we've got a 60% fetal alcohol syndrome disorder in the offspring. And that's transgenerational now as well. So how do you fix that? Well, not over a year. That's 2 or 3 generations to fix that.
I was going to say, Brian, probably we need to wrap it up now, and I think everyone should give Brian a big thank you.
And thank you for being here.
And definitely, if you have more questions or you'd like to talk to Brian more, he will be around. You can find him easily in his pink shirt today. And thank you once again for coming all the way from WA. It's like from a different country, really, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you. And if you're interested in listening to more Legalise Cannabis, politicians, the Victorians, Rachel and David are speaking in the tent at 1 o'clock today down here, so you can hear what's been happening in Victoria after that WA roundup. Now, next we have Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather from California again, so after your excellent talk yesterday. So, Jeff, do you want to come on up and we'll work out how to best set you up today?